distribution system level and consumer level. And today we will discuss our rather recent report, which was published in February. It's on power losses, especially on electric grids. We will have, first of all, our representative to give you the keynote speech on the report, Michael Westerman. He will start rather soon, after a couple of minutes. And with that, we will have reactions by Charles Escher, who's the Secretary General of Edge of Smart Grids. And then to accompany him, we have Carlos Castelconesa from the EU DSO entity. He's the team lead and team lead of these expert groups. And with that reactions, with their reactions, we will then move on to the closing remarks, and maybe we have the Q&A as well for you, so you can send questions through the Q&A box. With that, I would like to hand over to Michael. Are you ready, Michael?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm ready. I will share my screen with you. So I hope you can see my presentation. And yes, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar and for giving me the opportunity to present our third report on power losses. Firstly, I would like to provide some background information concerning this report. So this is a follow-up of already 2 editions of the power losses report that were published in 2017 and 2020. And as always, we try to get more information and more participants in our reports. And as you can see in this graph, we were able to extend the number of participants for this edition to the number of 40 countries. In these 40 countries, all 9 ECRB contracting parties are also included, and you can see that we cover now almost all Europe. The current report, this one, the third edition, is based on a survey from the year 2023. And in this survey, we cover data from the years 2013 up to 2022. We started drafting of this report in beginning of the last year in 2024. And we're drafting it through over the year. And so in January, we got finally the approval of this the distribution system working group. And end of January, we got the approval of the General Assembly. And so the report was published in February on the 11th. In this report, we describe the way power losses are defined, calculated, procured, and treated by the regulatory framework of all the responding countries. It also provides a comparison of the distribution, transmission, and total losses as far as we got those numbers from the countries. And we highlight very briefly some effects of smart meter dissemination and the energy efficiency directives on power losses. And it is a bit like a good tradition in our reports that we try to include some case studies. We do it in the benchmarking report and in this report as well. And so this time we have one case study from Portugal, which describes the mechanism to encourage the reduction of losses in distribution networks. And finally, we have all the data that is used for the report in an appendix. And we have fact sheets for all participating countries. So for all 40 countries, we have a set of fact sheets that is set up of 4 pages for each country with general information about the determination, the regulatory framework, and the latest numbers. So this is a very extensive appendix, and you can always look up if you're interested with some general information. So first of all, very common knowledge maybe that power losses are a component of every electrical grid, and they're just a consequence of transmission and distribution of electricity. In a very general way, losses are understood as the difference between the energy flowing in and out of the grid. And we can divide losses into technical and non-technical losses. The technical losses are mostly dependent on the technical characteristics of the power grid. And the non-technical losses are understood like hidden consumption, or that is in-house consumption or public lighting, theft sometimes, and other things that are not really a technical or explainable component of the losses. Typically, they are measured on higher voltage levels because it is quite easy to really measure them. And in many ways, they're calculated or estimated on the lower voltage. We can see that a reduction of power losses has some positive effects, such an improvement of energy efficiency and grid reliability, and furthermore, some economic environmental benefits. An advanced metering with the use of smart meters can reduce metering errors and lead to a more accurate measurement of electricity consumption and losses. And furthermore, distributed generation, we see that it can have either positive or negative effects on power losses, which depends on the distance and the simultaneousness of generation and loss. When we look at the definition of losses, we see that all countries, except for my country, Germany, include non-technical losses in the volumes that are in this report. So in every numbers you find non-technical losses are included, but except for Germany. We found, or in the answers, we found that many countries don't distinguish between technical and non-technical losses, and that their overall losses are just defined as the difference between injected and delivered energy. And most of the countries estimate non-metered consumption. So because of the character of consumption and non-metered consumption, it is not seen as loss, as a power loss. That is the effect of that. How do we determine the losses? And the most used methodology to determine network losses is based just on the difference between total electricity injections and the electricity offtakes. And in general, this approach is the same for both distribution and transmission grids. So when we come to the level of losses, it's necessary to have a few preliminary remarks that are important. First, we are comparing 40 countries, so it's a lot of different differences, regional differences, country-wise differences. So it's important to keep in mind that the losses are sometimes defined very differently from country to country. In these reports, also in the first two editions, the losses are calculated as a percentage of energy injected into the grid. And we were trying to make sure that we use the same methodology for calculating all the required numbers and calculations. So we did it on our own, and so we make sure that everything was calculated in the same methodology. And if you look at the graphs in the report, you will find some of them that are split up. And we did that for the reason of clarity, because having 40 time series in one graph would be quite confusing, maybe. So we split the time series figures into two groups. One group is containing all the countries above a certain threshold, and the other one below a certain threshold. And we set different thresholds for distribution, for transmission, and total losses. You will see that in the report. So this is an example. In this graph figure, you see that it is total losses as a percentage of injected energy. On the left side, we see all the time series of countries below 7%. In the middle figure is the same time series, but only countries that are above the threshold of 7%. And on the right side, you see a box plot with all data available, and it's a bandwidth, so the minimum and the maximum value, the latest value, and an average value. So this is a very brief overview about maybe the whole spectrum of losses for one country during the last 10 years. So the total losses in this figure, you see, they vary for the latest year, 2022, they vary between 2.61% and 20.65%. So it's a difference of a factor 10. That's a quite huge difference, but you can see that the countries are just on a different levels. Not this figure, but if you look at the other figures, you see that losses in distribution, that they vary between 1.95% and 20% as well, with substantial differences between the countries. But what we can see from those numbers is that the countries with the highest distribution losses, that were Albania and Kosovo, have managed to cut those losses down by more than 50% or nearly a third during 10 years. So this is really a remarkable reduction of losses. But we also see a few countries with increasing losses that are not the majority of countries, but some countries we observe that the losses are rising in the last years. So that is what I mentioned already. And for transmission, we see that the losses vary between roughly 1% and roughly 4% in the last year. There are some increases of loss of transmission losses in the last few years, but these increases are very marginal, so it's not really relevant to mention, but just the number is saying that it's going slightly up. And of course, we can see that the percentage of losses is not only dependent on the energy flows as well, but it's also on the dependent on the volume that's injected into the grid. So we can have rising losses, although the absolute value of losses is unchanged. When it comes to procurement, we know that the Electricity Market Directive obliged the system operators to procure energy they use to cover power losses. And as a consequence, in most European countries, the system operators are responsible for procurement. So it could be different, but in most countries, it's a system operator who is responsible. There are a few exceptions from this. In 5 countries, it is a supplier, and in 1 country, there is a special balance responsible party who is responsible. If you want to regulate the way power losses or the reduction of power losses, there are several approaches. And from a regulator's perspective, the system operator should be given clear incentives to reduce power losses instead of just passing through the cost to the customer. And consequently, we see that incentives in some kind or of any kind regarding power losses in distribution have been implemented in 27 countries. And for transmission, it is implemented for 80 countries. So there's still an amount of countries that did not implement incentives for reduction of distribution of power losses. Maybe oops. Sorry, as one reason that there are not so many countries that have implemented transmission incentives to reduce transmission losses, we see that losses on transmission net grids are mostly technical, and so it is more difficult to set incentives to reduce them if you can just change the technical equipment, and that it's a bit difficult to just reduce them. So when you are going through the report, we have concluded with some findings and a few kind of recommendations that are highlighted in this report. First of all, we see that the reduction of power losses is really an important contributor to improving energy efficiency, and it helps decreasing the operational expenses of power grids. It is worth mentioning that non-technical losses have very different definitions and different components which they include. And in some cases, they are not even seen as losses because they're kind of non-measured consumption. So that makes it really difficult to have a clear picture of how losses are distributed. We see that incentives that aim to reduce the power losses have been implemented in the majority of countries, not in all countries, but in 27 of them. And according to the Energy Efficiency Directive, the system operators are required to quantify the overall volume of network losses and optimize network and improve network efficiency. When we look at the use of smart meters, we see that to bring about a distinct reduction in non-technical losses, a significant level of smart meter penetration is essential. So that would be a clear recommendation later on. And the improved use of smart meter will also lead to a reduction of energy consumption in some extent. What we also find or have seen is that in most countries, the system operators are responsible for procurement with only a very few exceptions. After having all these answers from the participant countries, we try to formulate some recommendations. Like in every comparison of such a huge number of country numbers, it is essential that we have a harmonized definition of power losses. That would make benchmarking and comparison really easier and more accurate, and it enables proper benchmarking among countries. It would also be good to have a consensus of a clear differentiation between technical and non-technical losses for the same reason that it would really simplify the benchmarking process. And we find that system operators should be given clear incentives to reduce power losses instead of just allowing to pass through the cost. That could be that they operate on higher voltage levels, for example, or that they really replace older transformers with new high efficiency transformers. And as a last part, we see that the increased smart meter penetration can simplify and expedite matching the supply to actual demand, as a need to use load profiles to estimate demand would be reduced. So it would be just a more accurate way for billing and for measuring consumption. So smart meter can help lower the non-technical losses, especially regarding causes such as faulty meter reading or illegal consumption. And of course, if we want to make recommendations, we have to keep in mind the country-specific characteristics. So we should make able the use of individual solutions rather than giving a single regulatory framework all applied over Europe. Yeah, that's it from my side, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm looking at the Q&A. Maybe we could take some questions if there are any already. Seems people are still thinking about it. So I will invite now Charles Esser to give his reaction on the report. Please, Charles.
Thank you, Veli-Pekka. And let me just go ahead and share my my presentation. Just a second. If I can get Teams to work a little quick. more quickly. There we go. I think this should be it should be loading up now. There it should be. Veli-Pekka, all clear?
All clear, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, first of all, thank you to Council of European Energy Regulators, CER, for inviting me, an organization that I know well. And indeed, I was in previous editions of the report. I conferred with the lead authors in my previous role. So I'm very pleased to be discussing this report today, which is a report that I like very much and is very interesting. So first of all, indeed, what I want to say to CEER and to the energy quality of supply work stream is congratulations on the report. Really, it's great to have a third edition. Data is useful for transparent, well-functioning markets, be it distribution or transmission. So I think it's a service to the market. Also, thanks for the case study in Portugal, which also refers to EDSO's member which I can give you some feedback. They found it useful, and they do appreciate the example of Portugal and Iradish that's included in the report. We certainly agree that international benchmarking is difficult with the different standards and definitions. This makes European guidelines difficult. Of course, even the voltage levels are not the same, and voltage levels obviously affect the level of technical losses. Perhaps this heterogeneity is even a bigger challenge at distribution level, which of course today representing EDSO, we're an association of industry association of large and medium-sized electricity distribution system operators. So just to be clear, I'm not representing in any way the transmission system operators today. But of course, the findings were also interesting on transmission level. And even I think that Mikhail mentioned this, some countries do not even distinguish between technical and non-technical losses. So that makes it complicated. What's included in non-technical losses is diverse. Some have theft or hidden losses or non-metered consumption. So that again is difficult. How losses are measured is also diverse. Estimates or measures, and we do think it's good that we're looking at losses per kilometer. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I'll get to that in just a second. So yeah, we had a couple of interesting findings for us. One finding it was really interesting to us was that losses in distribution are lower in countries with a higher DSO revenue per kilometer. So that sort of prompts the question: do you get what you pay for? Perhaps yes, all else equal. But I think that's something really interesting to consider in a time of global competitive concerns and the concerns about grid tariffs' contribution to electricity prices, which certainly is very much on the agenda here in Brussels nowadays. So something to think about, whether the level of investment, if you're cutting investment, that there are costs to that too in terms of a level of losses, which then are of course paid for in other ways. Excuse me, apologies for that. Also, a very interesting finding was this finding that countries with lower population density have lower distribution losses, even though longer distances between metering points would result in higher losses in megawatt hours. It'd be interesting to strip out the technical and non-technical losses there, because I think the theory is that this is explained by higher density areas having higher non-technical losses. In other words, somehow, maybe in very dense, I'm just postulating it would be interesting to look closely at this, but somehow in high density areas, maybe theft is easier to carry out than in rural areas, or maybe there are other kinds of hidden losses or some kinds of non-metered consumption in high density areas. So I think that would be really interesting to pull out. But these are really interesting findings for us, and I copied the figures there directly from the report. So I do think that commend the authors for taking a look at those issues and looking at those correlations, and really wanted to cite that. So this is a question of what are DSOs doing about losses, and Mikhail mentioned some of the legal requirements at European law, and of course there's every member state regulator. There are incentive schemes. There's energy efficiency first principle and so forth that the DSOs should be addressing losses. And so I don't want to talk about individual countries. In a few countries, it's true that a single EDSO member is responsible for the entire distribution grid. For example, in Republic of Ireland or in Portugal, but in most EU countries, of course, there's more than one DSO, and so I don't think I'll comment on individual countries, but I do want to say that the general trend of reduction of losses, particularly non-technical losses, is a good one. I know that there were some exceptions to that, but generally that seemed to be the trend, and that's a good thing. Our members certainly endeavor to reduce non-technical losses. And so one of the things we have as EDSO is something we call success cases, which is really looking at individual member DSOs, what they've done on a range of technical challenges to have success. In this case, with the success we're interested in today is reducing losses. And so there are a number of, I have the link there, a number of cases on the EDSO website. Obviously, they're not all about just losses, but there's some other ones there that are interesting about losses, such as the case of distribution network webcams and the Reconnect project. But I selected two today that I wanted to look at just to show what I think DSOs are doing about losses. And so one is from our member IDEA in Spain, ITRAFO, which is an architecture centered on the secondary substation, where different low voltage supervision or automation solutions are located, managed by a central element. I'll show you this in a minute. These based on market standards that allow for flexible, scalable, common operators. So whereas the reduction in power losses by using non-tap changer transformers, they can help minimize power losses by adjusting the voltage to be as close to nominal as possible. This is really relevant now more than ever, because as we have higher distributed energy resource penetration, this can vary significantly. So the other one, which I'll show you, which is from the same member mentioned in the case study, which is in Portugal, which again, given the amount of distributed energy resources in the grid, the complexity of managing the low voltage network escalates. And so they've created this GridWise platform to integrate IT and operational technology to monitor substations, so it can do technical loss analysis. So it can calculate technical losses within the network to provide actionable insights for planning investment decisions, which is very important. And also, I think mentioned in the CEER report about the degree to which losses need to be taken into account in investment decisions. That was also an interesting part of the report, which I won't get into the details now, but I think that's also worth reading in the report. And also, the GridWise can also look at fraud mitigation. So it using these kinds of technologies, artificial intelligence and so forth, can try to identify where perhaps there's fraud going on. So I think those are really interesting things to do that. I'll just show a bit more here, so you can see there that in Spain, which is the case of IDEA, the DSOs have the responsibility to maintain the voltage within plus or minus 7% of the nominal value. And so DER can cause unpredictable voltage fluctuations that complicate the control of the voltage level, and of course they need to maintain the voltage level within regulated range. And so the on-load tap changer can play a relevant role in achieving a dynamic adaptation voltage fluctuations to load generation and power flows. So you can see there a smart transformer in the secondary substation and then, oops, sorry, I went one ahead. The solution that was brought up by our member Ide is based on an architecture centered on the secondary substation where different low voltage supervision or automation solutions are located, all managed through a central element called the low voltage remote terminal unit and based on market standards. And so you can see there a proposal of the type of architecture that's based there. And one of the things that this is able to do, amongst other things, is have a reduction of power losses. So these OLTC transformers can help minimize power losses by adjusting the voltage to be as close to nominal as possible. As I mentioned, this is really relevant in high DVR penetration, which is more and more the case, and particularly in Spain. That's one example. And then the other one is Gridwise, which is from our member in Portugal. And if you given the critical nature of the low voltage network, we need to have enhanced visibility and control mechanisms akin to those already in the medium and low and high voltage networks. Historically, lower voltage networks have had much more limited digitalization. And so we're trying to change that, and certainly the Gridwise project in our member Irish works to that, as it's really more important than ever, as I mentioned, just as was the case in Spain, it would be the case everywhere, as you have more distributed energy resources on the grid. Their influence on voltage stability must be carefully managed. We need to have operational efficiency to reduce costs, and having positive management of the network requires automation and analytics. And so what this Gridwise project has done is it created an intelligent platform with IT and OT to effectively monitor transformer substations. So by using AI, Internet of Things, etc., they can create a real-time centralized monitoring system on a low-voltage network. And as you can see, it really helps with technical loss analysis. Having this technical loss analysis allows for actionable planning insights or planning and for investment decisions, which we've also mentioned in the CEER's report, and also, as I mentioned, fraud mitigation, which will reduce non-technical losses. So those are just a couple of examples, real-world examples of two DSOs in Europe that are implementing procedures, solutions to reduce losses. I also want to talk a little bit about regulatory decisions in my time that's left. And so a few things, I think it's really important to think about the regulatory considerations in terms of losses. And so firstly, I think we would say that incentives should be established in such a way to provide the right investment operation signals. So we want a clear indication from us as DSOs on how to reduce losses, that those incentives should really push that clearly. We want a level playing field. We would say the processes should not be overly complicated. One of the things that we noticed in the March ACE report on network tariffs is they used the example of Norway, where it has a tarification scheme based on marginal grid losses differentiated to each network node. We would say this is quite difficult to achieve on a distribution level. Might make sense in a more older centralized system, but as we become more and more decentralized, I mentioned in the two previous examples that a lot of these solutions to reduce losses are based on higher levels of distributed energy resources in the distribution network. It's really important to have that the marginal cost is close to zero when it's closer to demand, and therefore have energy losses to be less relevant. One of the reports, that of course our members are also part of Eurelectric and representing the electricity industry, and the well-known report from last year notes that as most renewables are produced and consumed within the same distribution grid, that this is more efficient with lower losses. This sort of brings me back to the first CEER power losses report, where they used the Viesco case study in Spain. Viesco is owned by one of our members, and I just took some quotes there from the first report, and so that's actually CEER's quotes, but I think they're really relevant. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but we do still think that it's really important to emphasize that when NRAs consider incentives to reduce network losses, how grid losses percentage is calculated should be taken into account in order to avoid the effect of energy injected into the grid by distributed generation. So we want to prevent a situation where the transmission of energy to networks of higher voltage excessively penalizes distributors in areas with lower demand. So I think it's still really important to keep that into account, and I brought that back from the first report. And then finally, my last slide, just a couple more regulatory decisions, just considerations. We think that lower losses costs should not be borne by DSOs. Some regulatory perspectives allege that retailers assume additional risk of managing the cost of losses until they're recovered. We think transferring this risk to DSOs could be a bad idea since it's increasing the costs and burden for regulated activity without any fundamental reason for this. Particularly now, any initiative to de-risk grid activities in the energy markets is very welcome, given the enormous investment needs in Europe's grid sector. Upwards of 60 billion euros per year in distribution alone is really needed. Also, we'd like to point out that avoiding energy losses really shouldn't be an exercise in trading risk management for DSOs. So incentive schemes really should be volume-based and not penalize the DSO for price volatility. When that it happens to have more losses, non-technical losses, or even technical losses, just when it happens to be a higher price shouldn't be something that the DSO is penalized for. And then we would encourage that zero-sum benchmarking for DSOs should be, in our view, avoided. There's some member states where it's used. We think that is not likely to really bring out real efficiency improvements. Where you have a situation where the penalties amount is collected and distributed amongst the best performers, this creates a kind of competition amongst DSOs, but not necessarily creating a collective improvement of the whole sector in the member state or in the country. So with that, I think I've used up my time, and I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Veli-Pekka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Very comprehensive. Thank you. I'm still looking. I think I saw someone raise their hand. It seems to be gone now. But if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tool for questions. Okay, Carlos, do you have any further comments or reactions?
Thank you, Veli-Pekka. Thank you, Charles, for your presentation. Not much, just to complement what Charles said and join him to congratulate you for this comprehensive report. I believe it provides a valuable opportunity to reflect on where we stand on this topic and where we should go ahead with this. And then just to say that from DSO entity, with our technical vision, we are very customer-centric. So efficiency is a part of our DNA, and therefore minimizing losses is part of is complementary or compatible with what we do. And just to further elaborate on efficiency, that we keep it in mind with all our deliverables when we make a proposal for network codes, our efforts in supporting digitalization, smart and grid, as mentioned in the report. These are the way forward to increase the efficiency. And then, yeah, just to encourage NRAs and all of you to continue providing the environment for DSOs to invest in grid smartening and grid development, because those are the ultimate tools that will allow the next leap on energy efficiency. And yeah, that would be it from my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Now, I encourage you to send questions if you have any. And meanwhile, Michael, do you have a quick response on the comments which you received from Charles and Carlos?
It was a lot of comments and reaction.
Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult to react to them spontaneously. But I think I have already maybe some ideas for the next case studies in a follow-up report. So at least I would try to have a look at those experiences Charles mentioned, and maybe that would be something interesting, or even interesting if we could figure this in some kind of a questionnaire. What new technologies are used to improve the reduction of losses? That would be really a good idea, maybe.
Yes, definitely. So since I'm not seeing any questions, I now encourage you to raise your hand, and we can open your mic and camera so you could you could ask your question in person if you like as well.
Maybe in the meantime, I can just react, Kyle, just to say that we'd be interested to cooperate to in any kind of questionnaire or survey to DSOs to find out what kind of technological solutions they're using to reduce losses. That's interesting, and of course we're looking at it, but we haven't done a kind of systematic questionnaire of our members in that sense. So it could be a kind of useful for us as well to really know that.
Okay, now we are receiving some questions. Michael, can you see them? From Gilles Wilmart is the first one.
Not yet.
You have to open
yes.
the Q&A box to see them.
Yeah, now I see them.
Okay, good.
Okay, I have to admit that I don't know all the regulatory design to reduce losses. When I look at the question from Manuel Serrano, La Asunción, I think that I would have to look it up. I have to admit, but I can imagine even from our system of setting incentives is that you could have a kind of a bonus or penalty system, and that you are not obliged to have zero. Just reduce all the losses. So I think that it's a usual or common way to set incentives, like you get a kind of a path, or your history is your development path, and then you will have a kind of a bonus or penalty if you're getting better or getting worse compared to some kind of a reference value. That would be some very typical kind of setting an incentive.
Yeah, and Michael, there's another question. Do you see on the TSO
Yeah.
reducing losses?
Yeah, I mean we explained some measures that could be used to reduce losses, especially if I have to say I'm not a technician, so I'm not really into all the details. But what I learned is that it is one common practice would be to operate your grid on a higher level, not medium voltage but higher voltage level. that would reduce the technical losses definitely. And then, I mean, Charles also presented some case studies of how to reduce losses, which I didn't know up to now. But the use of more modern technical equipment is definitely something that would help reducing losses in the future, because the transformers are much more efficient, and so that would be the first two measures that would come into my mind. That was the question from Gilles Wilmot. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, and he's mentioning it's more on price of losses, not the volume, but it is what the regulators usually do. They are measuring in more in economic values, but of course the energy efficiency requirements will be affecting the technical losses as well. But how do you see that, Michael?
You mean the volume of losses, the reduction, or what? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a comment from Gilles on your answer that the incentive is on price of losses, not the volume actually, is his view.
That's difficult to answer, I think. I mean, if you want, I don't know how the price of losses really can be reduced, because I mean, it would have been an indirect effect, I think, if you have to invest into your grid to reduce losses, that would raise the network fees. And so I don't know exactly how the price of losses will then be affected. So the first thing that comes into my mind is how to reduce the volume of losses, but not really how the price is affected by that. I'm not so firm on that.
Then there's one related on if we would do some deep dive into the relation between different regulatory mechanisms, losses. Maybe that's something we might consider in the future, but meanwhile, we do some regulatory framework reporting every year on economic regulation issues. So I don't know whether we actually have done any deep dive in the losses in that sense, how the mechanism work on that.
So we did not do a comparison, but that is definitely a good idea, maybe, how the regulatory mechanisms affect the development of losses. You could do that if you look at all the fact sheets and try to find a figure or a scheme, maybe that you see. Okay, incentive regulation would have more effect, but we didn't do that so far. But with the information from the fact sheets, we could try to make a comparison about the different regulations and the development of losses. That would be an idea.
So I now see people raising their hands, but I don't know whether our colleagues from CEER, can they open their mics? Ilse, please.
Yes, we can, but at the moment I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, yeah, because I think I saw a couple of them, but they went away rapidly. All right. Meanwhile, when you think questions or raise your hand, I would like to tell what the quality supply workstream will work on to this year. It's related to this huge benchmarking report which we have on continuity of electricity and gas supply. And is it so, Michael, that we're going to update our interruption indicators with the newer data?
Yes, that's true. Just last week, we opened a new survey on the CEER website. So all countries are invited to update their interruption indicators. We thought it's only an update of the data data on interruption, but we saw that even that is a really quite a huge survey. So we're asking for your numbers of the last 5 years. We have the older values, although they are not in the survey, but we still have the data. Yeah, we opened the questionnaire, and as far as I remember, we set a first deadline by the end of June. So all of you, all of the NRAs are invited to join that report, and we will see how quick we can finish that update. I think by the end of the year we should be done, or beginning next year.
Yes, meanwhile, when you wait for the new report to come, you could take a look at our new report on incentives in regulatory frameworks with focus on OPEX CAPEX neutrality. I mean, losses are part of the OPEX, of course, and that discussion is of course very relevant and important. And as described today as well, we know there are different treatments of losses in different regulatory frameworks. So we will continue discussion, of course, with that and with the stakeholders. And with that report, for example, we found out that OPEX capitalization is something that is really discussed between different countries for the moment and different regulators and so forth. And whether we have been discussing in the previous year, for example, the out-based regulation and TOTEX modeling and all that. So if you're interested, that's a new report from us. You can find it from our website, and it was published on 15th of May. So it's very, very new, relevant and new report on these issues if you're interested. Okay, I think there's another question. No, Sasan is giving you the link to it, so thank you, Sasan. So if it seems that there are no comments or questions yet, I don't know whether Charles or Carlos, do you want to say final words before let's see, there's another one. Yeah, that is a very good question, since at least as I work for the Finnish Energy Authority for the moment, so I know the eco design issues are tackled here locally, but there's no perhaps information, at least by NRAs, on the European situation. But Charles, maybe can you see the question related to eco design directive?
Yes, I mean, I don't have offhand. I mean, discuss the information, or it's something we discuss internally, but we're just discussing it in a kind of qualitative way and not sort of looking at statistics. So, but again, that is an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, it would take, again, a questionnaire and research and so forth. So it's not something you just do offhand, but certainly something we've talked about, but only in a qualitative way.
All right, then. Thank you. My final advisement or invitation to you is to join CEER's annual conference on the 25th June. That's CEER is now 25 years old, so we will have this special event, and we will of course discuss regulatory strategies for consumers and their empowerment, and of course system integration and market efficiencies are great value to us, of course, and we will like to discuss that. So you can join us online. At least if I don't know whether there's it's in Brussels at the Margriet Museum also. So if there are seats left, please you can register through our website.
I plan to be there.
All right. Yes. Sorry, Charles. And look at the chat, and there's no more questions, so I guess we can end this webinar a bit earlier than we anticipated, but that's all right since we covered everything and we had discussion and of course reactions from Charles and Carlos. I thank you very much for that, and all the questions sent to us through the Q&A. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact CEER's offices. You can find us on our website and send us an email or message through that. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your coming summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.